All right, we are going to continue our State of the Club series. We have a very special guest with us, Wayne Girard. You guys know him on Twitter and on YouTube at Wayne in Rome. This man has been around the block. You have seen his work absolutely everywhere, from AS Roma themselves, Gentlemen Ultra, Football Italia, IFTV. Wayne, thank you so much for joining us. How are you feeling, man?
Feeling great. Hell of an intro. Thank you very much.
Hey,
I'm excited. I always want to talk culture. So let's do the business.
yeah, 1 point through two matches. You're excited. I can't say that I feel the same way about my team, but we'll get into it. Let's jump right in then. So last season, maybe a little bit of a disappointment. I'd love to get your general assessment on how Roma did. Sixth place in Serie A, did make it to that Europa League final, lost on penalties, unfortunately. Give us your high level thoughts.
Yeah, I think that the thing which really bothered me about that was the Juventus point deduction because Mourinho goes out and says something really which needed to be said was that when you have a certain team in the table and they're lower or they're more, you adapt your team, your starting 11, and it reflects that. If you know you've got pushing, you're going to go with players who don't play as much, who are not as experienced or not as good. And when you know it's tighter, well, then you put out a different lineup. So the way that things went back and forth seriously affected Roma. On top of that, they ran out of gas. Like the team is so affected by financial fair play that they can't get really that type of depth to go forwards in not just one, but two or three competitions. So to me, it wasn't so much about the play because at the time, at sometimes the play looked really good, but at other times it just looked like they were getting exhausted. And when Mourinho can't put out his starting lineup, I think the dominoes began to fall. I don't take blame entirely away from the manager at some points. There always has to be a share of the pie, but I think that so much was about external forces affecting the club.
Yeah, I think Wayne hit the nail on the head there with the depth, the lack of depth. Roma couldn't do it on two fronts. And you can tell me if you agree, Wayne, but I think Mourinho made the right choice going for the Europa League in the end. Because I think with the way that team played last season, I think they were more built for tournament football, knockout football. And they came within penalty kicks, right? And when they got to penalty kicks, you saw who was shooting and you didn't have that great of a feeling about it. But I think he had to make that choice, and because of depth and injuries and everything else. And I think if he had to do that over, I would agree with him to do the same thing.
Yeah, definitely tournament style, built to play that way. And when that penalty kick is not given, man, it just seems like it's more than bad luck at times.
I think that's fair. I think we would all maybe agree on some of these guys. I'm thinking about Tammy Abraham. I'm thinking about Bellotti as, something of a disappointment last year. Who were the ones that stood out? Did somebody like Dybala measure up to the expectations Roma fans had for him? Is there anybody that were missing? Who really stood out for you? And was anybody more of a disappointment maybe than a Bellotti or a Tammy Abraham?
I think a lot of those problems came from the midfield. That you look at Belotti and Tammy Abraham, and those are guys who do well with midfield that's based around build up rather than kick the ball up and hope for the best. Those aren't those types of strikers. Those are guys who need to be in the end of the final third between the center backs, playing off the shoulder of the two defenders, the second to last or the last defender, somewhere in that. So because the midfield was so rigid, it seriously affected Tammy or Bellotti. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a few chances out there where the boys could have done better, but scoring is contagious. And when you are not set up in a way which is advantageous to you as a striker, it can go really bad. And unfortunately, it went bad for not just one but two strikers last year. But I do think that's from the overall team build, and I think that Mkhitaryan was never replaced, and that was like, you can only be as strong as your weakest link, and that omission of Mkhitaryan to me spoke volumes, and it really showed last season.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think Mkhitaryan was a huge loss last season. They miss his, he's just a smart, intelligent player in the midfield. He opened up so much for other players. 2 years ago, you saw how well Pellegrini played with Mkhitaryan, right? And the season he had, and kind of the downturn he had a little bit last season, some knocks and things like that took away from his form. But I agree with Wayne. I think Mickey was a huge loss. And I think we see a little difference. We'll get into this season, but Wayne, we saw with Belotti these first two matches, Roma controlled possession in those matches, and he got better chances, and he finished some of those chances where he didn't have to be just kind of like hoof it long to Belotti and hope for the best.
Yep, that's why he's succeeding now. And also, he's said it. He's like, I'm back to 100% now.
Yeah.
Whatever. A lot of times, if there's an injury, if there's something which is not below ground, but how do you say it? Like something that's just not being highlighted, something that's not public in the news. There are players go through certain things, whether it's mental or physical, or it's a hairline stress fracture like Iturbe used to have. And it's like, this guy stinks. Well, there was more to it. So, but him being 100% and then scoring 3 goals in the first game of the season, to me, that says a lot.
And just one guy that Steve, you touched on him, but Wayne, I want to get your thoughts on Pellegrini because, I watch this guy, he's got all the talent in the world, game in and game out. It seems like he's everywhere. He's always on or around the ball, but the results just haven't been there for him in terms of goal scoring, in terms of assists. What do you make of Pellegrini?
Steve, you want to hit first?
Yeah, I could go first. I mean, I think last season, I think he had a bit of trouble fitting in with Dybala at times. I think he was, 2 seasons ago, he was the man on the ball a lot of the time in the midfield, the trequartista. He was the one linking with Tammy and with Zaniolo and whoever else was involved in the attack, Mkhitaryan. And I think last season he really did have trouble fitting in with Dybala. I think we saw that where Dybala dominates a lot of the ball. And I think Pellegrini did have some physical things that he tried to play through as the captain. And I think he does that a lot more than people realize. I mean, he ate a lot of minutes last year for this team. And then you saw him last week, his first match back after he's suspended in week 1, and he looked pretty good. I thought he had a pretty good match in a match where the team didn't play all that well. I mean, we see his set piece ability has grown tremendously in the past couple seasons. He hit a post on free kick. He set up Cristante, who headed one off the bar off of his corner kick. So I'm looking for him to rebound. I think he looks healthier too, and I think that'll make a big difference. But I think it is a little bit of him having to gel a little bit better with Dybala and kind of understanding that Dybala's going to drift a lot, right? And that's what Pellegrini was doing a couple seasons ago too. I think he was drifting a lot more. How do you see it, Wayne, from like a tactical perspective with those two?
It's strange to me because at times I've looked at Pellegrini and I've said, this guy is so much better as a box-to-box, as an intermedio. And then other games, I'm like, he's not doing so great there. He looks a little lost. And then like, maybe trequartista. And that to me is a bit more of a suitable role because when I watch him play with the national team, I see him play free and he wants to create and he wants to play 1-2s and burst forwards, into the final third. And that's him having fun. And I kind of miss that Pellegrini who goes out there and enjoys the game and who played at Sassuolo and did a heck of a job creating plays and just adding into the overall attack. And I miss that right now. I don't know if it's fatigue from last season carries off into this season, but he does look a little bit more invigorated. I thought his execution in Verona was poor, but I do think that there are special circumstances with that game, especially as Verona was allowed to play their game and sit back once the first goal happened. So I would like to see him again and watch him closely. I think that he's going to have a big game against Milan. I know that Dybala is doubtful, so he's not going to be playing 90 minutes. And like Steve, you mentioned, I want to see how he plays without Dybala versus when Dybala is on the pitch. That's something I really want to tactically pay attention to and just see his body language. How does he contribute in which phase, whether it's defensive or offensive more? So I think that's a subplot coming into Friday.
So given your outlook on the squad and your perspective on how they've performed, let's talk about the manager with Mourinho, a man that has, no shortage of opinions written about him on any given week. Are you guys happy with how he's been doing at Roma so far? Do you feel like he's been getting the most out of the squad? Or do you think he's been maybe, had a few missteps or has, made some decisions that maybe have cost Roma some points or some important matches here and there over the course of the last few seasons?
Steve?
I was gonna let you go first, but I mean, overall,
I'll take it
I'm
if you want.
yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to step on your toes. I am happy with Mourinho for what he's developed for the club mentally. I think that he has gotten a lot of character building in the works. I really see it. Roma, for a period of time, I think for the majority of the season, was the team who scored the most goals from the 80th minute on. And I still see that never give up attitude instilled in them. He's no nonsense. And it's not just like he's out there barking. He's actually relatively quiet with his own players. It's not like he is this big, like Antonio Conte type of motivator. So I do think he gets as much out of them tactically. Sometimes it hurts as a fan. You want to see your boys go out there and play football and sling passes around and, make you smile by the way that they play sometimes. But with Mourinho, it's different because it's so thematic. It's you know what you're gonna get. You know you're gonna get a low block. They're gonna try to counter attack. Against Verona, they had to come out of their shell a little bit more. It didn't look completely natural. I wish there was more of a plan B. But the best managers in the world are not necessarily inventors, but they're guys, they're managers who have a set way that they play. That's what they built their bread and butter on. But even though you say that, like Ancelotti plays a certain way, Christmas tree formation, lets his best players play to their strengths. At the same time, Mourinho has played a couple different formations, and now I see a couple tweaks from the 3-4-2-1 through a 3-5-2, and I'm liking what I see so far. So tactically, last year, I wasn't the biggest fan. What I see now does seem like it fits the current crop of players the best. Steve?
Yeah, I agree. I think from the mental standpoint is where we've seen a huge difference with Roma in the way that they fight. They don't give up against smaller clubs when they're down. We even saw it last week against Verona. They were fighting to the end in that they were down 2-0 until pretty late in that match. And you're right. He doesn't really go after the players the way Conte does. He does it more in the media where he'll protect his players, I think. And some people might see what he's saying as excuses, but I think a lot of what he's saying is the truth when he's talking about the type of players Roma has not being good enough for top four, or, the depth isn't there to compete on two fronts or whatever. And he's very frank, I think, a lot of the time. And sometimes that's refreshing, I think. The tactics, you're right, that for 2 seasons, sometimes watching that sit back in the low block against like the Milans and Inters of the world. And you're just like, all right, can we try to do something here? Like we have Dybala on the team now. We have Tammy, who was coming off a really good season. Like, let's try to score some goals. And I guess in some ways that's him trying to just protect his defense and protect his midfield that wasn't very good last year, by kind of just using numbers. And I think you're right. I think we've seen some more tactical flexibility, even though he hasn't been on the sidelines. He's involved some way in the ear of Bruno Conti. Like, there's no way Bruno Conti's managing the match. He's not with the club every day. And we have seen switches to the 4-man back line this season. We've seen some changes to the shape. And I think that's refreshing. I hope that against Milan, we don't come out Friday and just kind of sit back and wait and then not kind of go hit Milan until they've punched us in the mouth once or twice, which has happened in the past in some of these big matches. And that's hopefully what we're going to see more of this year, where there's that more flexibility. If we have to go 4-man back line, do it. Utilize some more of the midfielders when they're healthy, like the Renato Sanchez is that we brought in, and kind of be a little bit more aggressive, I think, going forward sometimes.
So the goodwill towards what he's been achieving on the pitch is still kind of offsetting some of the, maybe extracurricular struggles that comes with Mourinho. As you mentioned, Coach, he hasn't been on the sidelines yet this season because he's serving a sideline ban. That there's still no concerns right now with, some of the stuff that comes with Mourinho in terms of how he handles the media or interviews or even the refs.
I like it. It's not the PC thing to say, but I'm in favor of it. No one else sticks up for the club. The president of Rome doesn't speak. There's no press officer. I wish it were me. It's not. I live in Jersey City, regardless of the flag behind my head. But I think that he sees that there's a need, and he says it honestly. And sometimes the media doesn't know how to handle it. And I love the way that he goes back at them. And it's not necessarily it's not combative. He's just like, he just speaks truth and he just drops facts, and people don't know what to do. And I love it. I love to see them squirm.
Yeah, I think just because the Freakins are so quiet, like you said, they're behind the scenes owners, and Pinto doesn't say a whole lot. I think he's kind of taken on the face of the club role, where he's the one that is the mouthpiece for the club. And I think when there's refereeing issues, which we saw in the Europa League final, which could have cost them that final, right? Things like that, he's going to speak out. Maybe his behavior with the English ref, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, wasn't the best, but I'd have no problem with it. And the goodwill with the fans, I think, will last as long as Roma's doing what they're doing in Europe and competing, because you have to remember, before Roma won that Conference League, they hadn't won a trophy in a long time, over a decade, and they nearly won back-to-back European trophies, which pretty much no Italian clubs do anymore these days, right? Let alone a club like Roma, who has almost no European history in terms of winning.
So let's transition into, some of the stuff that's going on in the summer, into this season. Busy transfer window for Roma. I think that, at least, from what I can tell, maybe this is more than what you guys have been expecting, but a lot of players coming in, a lot of offensive help. You've got attacking midfield in Awar. You have Azmoun, the Iranian striker, and more recently in this week, we've got Romelu Lukaku coming in on loan from Chelsea. Do you guys feel like a lot of the needs that Roma maybe were missing coming into the season have been addressed, or do you still think, even with some of this transfer activity, there's still gaps that remain in the squad?
Yeah, I think that they have addressed many of the needs, right? Tammy Abraham getting hurt was killer. It was like 13 minutes at the end of the season last season that he blew out his ACL. The Roma ACL curse struck. It really, I think, affected their whole transfer plans. I think Tammy might have been the guy who was sold maybe along with Ibanez to kind of fund their summer. So it's been a lot of dealing with those FFP agreement regulations where they can't spend so much money. And Awar and Ndika were free signings. I think Ndika was brought in because they knew that Ibanez probably was the guy they would move this summer. We haven't seen him yet. Lorente was another loan deal. Christensen, a loan deal. Both guys from Leeds, a team that was relegated, looking to offload some salary. Awar, that free signing, to me, he looks very good so far. I think he's going to kind of take on that Mkhitaryan role that Wayne and I were talking about that they missed. He's looked very impressive so far. Renato Sanchez is another classic example of Roma taking a chance on a player who's coming off injury, very highly touted in the past, very talented player. Already missed a match, probably misses this week because of already a minor, muscle issue. But I think he's got a lot of talent, and if he can keep healthy, that fills a need in the midfield to push the ball through the midfield, which they haven't had last season. Paredes, I don't really rate that much, but I understand why he was brought in to kind of just fill the role in the deep lying midfield after Matic left unexpectedly. I was speaking with Nima Tavali today. He follows the Iranian national team closely. He had a lot of good things to say about Azmoun and Lukaku. I know you and Nick aren't so high on him. I know at 30, going on 31, he's not the same player he was when he was scoring.
Coach, don't say it's just me and Nick, because you are not high on him either. Don't be changing your tune just because he's coming.
No Roma fan was high on him until
don't
last
even
week.
Don't even pretend that this is a me and Nick
That's my
thing.
stance on it.
When you look at it from a Roma perspective, even at 30 years old, if he's a 15-goal scorer, that's an upgrade for Roma after what they went through last year. And I think he offers a different dimension at striker in the matches that Mourinho wants to play a little bit more defensive and have a guy they can hoof the ball to, hold up play, and do those things. I think he's going to combine well with Dybala. The one place I will say I'm concerned is goalkeeper right now, and I'll see what Wayne thinks about that. But Rui Patricio, I think, is a bit past it. And if the defense isn't as solid as last year, you might need a goalkeeper who's going to bail you out once in a while. And I don't think Rui's doing that. Last year, his XG, like post shot XG that they track goalkeepers with, was like minus 6.4, which is one of the worst in Serie A. And it hasn't been so great to open the year. So, I like the Mercato. It started very slow, but I think Pinto has really done a great job bringing in players to fill needs without spending much money.
Yeah, when you're really so constrained with transfer fees, you can only really get these free options. And you got to analyze them. Do they fit your? Because there's only X amount of free players out there, right? Are they going to fit your system too? If they do, then you got to actually convince these guys. And you know what? Most clubs want those free transfers too, especially since there are financial parameters at this time. On top of that, it bothers me in that the keeper situation has continued for a long time. I think I get this FOMO of other big clubs having talent, young talent right now. And I look at Roma, I don't want to crucify them because I understand the way, I understand why, but I would have liked to see a little bit more emphasis in young players. And I don't know if that's being impractical, but I look at some of the guys that come from Inter's youth academy, and they're really talented. Just across Italy, even Atalanta has great scouting. Roma's scouting was like Solbakken, at a guy that they faced, and he did a good job. They got him in. Other than that, it's been these options which are feasible or make economical sense. And I get it. I just feel like Roma could have, I don't know, maybe we could have done the strategy a little bit differently years ago. Like we shouldn't be in the position we're in now. I do think we should emphasize the young guys a little bit more. And Mourinho is doing that. I'm not saying he's not. I just know that there's so much talent in Rome. And for us to now be in this position where we are confined. Okay, so if we're confined, let's switch things up a little bit. Let's start to play with an emphasis in our academy. And let's make sure that every team plays like this. And we hire a manager who plays like this. Develop an ethos. So for me, I want to see things done a little bit differently. Am I happy with the players that have been brought in? Paredes, yeah, as emergency purchase or whatever loan. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Ndika is good. It's solid. Guy's great one-on-one. He's going to develop. He's young. He's going to have a transfer fee attached to him too when he does leave Roma. So that's great. Plus Valenza. Award, excellent. That's a coup. That's definitely my player of the Mercato thus far. Lukaku, good. You know, it's good. Would I have maybe done things differently in the sense of like, okay, Belotti's doing really good. Let him let him cook, let him do his thing, keep him confident, and then sign somebody younger? I think so. I know that's not the popular thing. I know that's not what's going to get 5,000 people to the airport, but that's me.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the younger players too, we talk about when we move into the guys that departed, because they really only sold Ibanez and Matic unexpectedly, but they had to sell Volpato, they had to sell Tahirovic, they had to sell Misori just to get to that 30 million euro area where they had to get to with the FFP negotiations that they went through with UEFA, where Volpato seems like a pretty talented kid. Tahirovic, you know, for Mourinho to bring him in at 18 years old and Matic to talk pretty highly of him, he's probably pretty talented, and now he's at Ajax, right? I think Roma's academy produces players. They just don't really get the chance in Rome enough. You know, even Pellegrini had to go away on loan for 2 years before he really was given a chance in Rome. He had to prove himself elsewhere. Do you think of some of these other guys that we've used as make weights in the past? Fratesi, right? He was used as make weight for Gregoire de Frel, who ended up going back to Sassuolo, was a bust anyway. I mean, that right there is it blows your mind, right? Politano is a guy who came good elsewhere. There's others too that maybe aren't as great, but like a Caprari's like a squad type player.
It's so frustrating because you know Faticanti is going to be good.
Yeah.
Tahirovic is already doing really good for Ajax. I'm like, damn it, man. Yeah, you bring up Fratesi, Politano. It gets under my skin. I got to be honest.
And then you even think about guys that want to come back. Like Fratesi wanted to come back desperately last summer, right? And they didn't make it happen. Scamacca was basically begging to come back this summer, and now he's at Atalanta because they got that Hoyland money. It's frustrating from that regard too.
But if you had all those players together, Steve, and they played for years now, they would have built up such a chemistry. They would have been good, man. That would have been a really good team. And I think that's at the core. I think that's really what I've been trying to say.
Yeah.
So I mean that leads us. You pretty much answered it for us, but I'll ask it anyway. You know, the situation. Listen, I don't think it's that dissimilar to a lot of clubs in Italy. Italy's a disaster. The league itself is a shell of what it was. So behind the scenes, you know, you mentioned the Friedkins, you mentioned Pinto. These guys came into sort of a mess, right? I think that's something that's fair to say. At least I've heard Steve say it in the past, so I'm going to take it as fact. You know, not the easiest situation over the past couple of years. You got Mourinho in there who has changed the culture of the locker room. You know, some of these players I think have probably come to the team because you have a Mourinho there, right? A name like that. Financial fair play is what it is. I don't think any of us fully understand it because it seems to depend on which club you actually are and not how you operate. Give me the overall assessment. I mean, what we're talking about, a 6th and 7th place finish the last 2 years since Mourinho's been there, since this ownership group has kind of been in there. What's the outlook? Are you guys happy overall? Are you happy considering, or do you think something needs to happen?
I think they're 5th place. I see Milan looks very strong. Juventus looks awesome. Well, maybe not awesome, but I think they'll figure it out and they will be a strong team. Napoli looks great. Inter are strong. Where does Roma fit in with a Lukaku who's probably past his best years, a decent midfield, an okay defense, and a not good keeper? Is that enough to break that top four, man? I don't see it. I wouldn't bet on it if I'm trying to be a neutral. I'm trying to be practical and not like, yeah, Dai Roma. Like, yes, Dai Roma. I love this team, but at the same time, like I know that the expectations of I read a lot top four right now. Why? Like based off of what? That's what's missing for me is based off of what.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to health. Dybala's got to stay healthy. Lukaku's got to stay healthy and produce, and Rui's got to be able to react to shots a little bit better, right? I mean that's scary because even if Roma's scoring goals, if the defense is not as good as it was the past couple seasons, what did they lose in Matic in the center of the midfield? They're protecting that defense that has looked a little shakier this year. I think overall, Nick, in terms of the Friedkins, you have to be fairly happy with what they've done, I think, as a Roma fan, because they've really injected a lot of their own cash into the club to get the finances better. They went big for Mourinho, right? And I think they have to be, congratulated for that because they brought Roma a trophy, nearly a second. Pinto, he gets a lot of heat. He got a lot of heat this summer, but I think in the end, I think he was working behind the scenes a lot more than Romanisi thought, because in the end they brought in quite a few players, and I think the squad is upgraded from last season overall in terms of talent and depth. But again, fighting with FFP is tough. And I do think some of those like free agent signings and even like the Lukaku loan signing, I think that has a lot to do with Mourinho's persona though, and he still has that reputation. He might not be the Mourinho that he was at Real Madrid or Inter's treble, and he might not have that same, I guess, success that he was having at that point, and that's probably why he's at Roma now, right? Because this was kind of like last chance for him in some ways with a bigger club, and he's proving he can still get trophies for clubs. But I do think like Aouar, Ndika, Dybala, Lukaku, like even Sanchez, do these guys come to Roma if Mourinho's not the coach? I don't know. I don't think so. A lot of them.
All right, we'll shift gears into what we expect coming up for this season. Wayne, you kind of touched upon it. Where do we really expect Roma to fall in the context of the league and what the squad is for Roma right now? Where do you realistically see them finishing in Serie A this year, and what do you think their goal should be for this coming campaign?
I think they finished fifth. I think their goal and what they really can achieve is the Europa League championship. I think they can win it. I think this team knows what it takes by Mancini, Smalling. Man, if Sanchez is there, he can really destroy. Hopefully, the bracket is fortuitous and kind to Roma. And if it's halfway decent, I think they can win the whole thing.
I agree. I think that is reasonable. I think they will shoot for top four. They're stating that top four is their goal, especially I think that's the signal of intent with the Lukaku signing. I think the club desperately needs to get back to Champions League. But like Wayne said, if they do win the Europa League, which I think they're fully capable of after last season, that's also a route to the Champions League. So they don't necessarily have to finish top four to make the Champions League. Could they finish fourth? I think they could if everything goes right and maybe Juve doesn't find its footing as well as it should, or Lazio continues to struggle. Atalanta is up and down at times. I think there is margin of error to finish fourth. I think fifth is more likely based on what we've seen from all these clubs over the past couple seasons, and maybe the injury histories of Dybala and some of these things. I think Napoli, Inter, and Milan though are clearly ahead right now, and I think it could come down to like Juve, Roma, maybe Atalanta, maybe Lazio, maybe even Fiorentina gets in the mix. I think it's gonna be a very tight race for fourth, and we'll see if Roma's got enough to do it on both fronts. But Europa League, I think, is also got to be a stated target again after what they did last year.
All right, give us one out on a limb, balls to the wall prediction, player prediction, club. I mean, you told us Europa League, but who's going to be the guy this year?
Oh, the one guy.
The guy.
If it's, I think it is going to be. I want to say Aouar, but I think Belotti is going to be the lifeline of it.
Okay.
I like it. I like it. I was sitting here with it at the tip of my tongue. It's hard to project like stats on Aouar. I think he's gonna be a big impact player for them. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Belotti scores in the 10 to 15 goal range if he gets enough playing time, depending on how much Lukaku takes off him in terms of playing time.
Well, he already doubled
that
last year's
midfield's
goals,
good.
right? I'm sorry, Wayne, what was that?
Yeah, I think that midfield's going to really help Belotti. I think he's going to thrive off them. If he just did that against Salernitana, I think that defensive pair, I wouldn't have pegged for that either, because Fazio and Guillaume are actually halfway decent center backs when they can play so low and have a guy like, muscling one another. And the way that Belotti just kind of, I want to say a certain word, but this is a PG show. The way that he manhandled,
you could say it.
The way that he manhandled Fazio, to me, I was like, yes. And seeing him push it past him like 3 times, it's like, that's my man. So I was happy to see that.
All right. Well, let's wrap up the episode. We're going to play one of our favorite games. It's buy or sell. Wayne, the way this works, I got some statements for you. You can tell me if you're going to buy that statement or if you're going to sell it. We'll start off easy. We'll take a look at Roma's point totals for this season. Do you buy or sell Roma getting over 64.5 points this campaign?
What is that times 3? Or divided by 3?
It'd be about 22
20
wins. 22 wins would get you to
about
66.
22 wins. Oh, God.
So for context, they finished with 63 last season.
I'm buying. Thank you. That is great context, actually.
Yeah, I'm going to buy as well. 70 needed you needed 70 for Champions League last year, so that just shows they do need a pretty big improvement if things go similar. But I do buy over 64.5. I think they are slightly better this year.
1 point through 2 games. You guys are bold. I like it.
We'll go player focus for our next buy or sell. The man of the hour, Romelu Lukaku, over 14.5 league goals this season. Buy or sell?
So
I'm gonna buy.
Yeah, coach, number 1 Lukaku fan all of a sudden. Of course he's gonna buy it.
I just think he's gonna be motivated, and as long as he's healthy, I think he scores 15 pairing with Dybala.
All right. Well, speaking of Dybala, he's the focus of our next buy or sell. Nick's favorite buy or sell category. Dybala over 24.5 games played this season.
Is that
In the league?
only?
In the league. Sorry.
In the league.
Sure.
sell.
He played 25 last season, so it's right on the cusp there.
Yeah. My lines are good.
I'm going to say I'm going to sell just because I think even if he stays healthy, I think they have more depth that he could be rested a little bit more. I think they're not going to want to risk him as often as they had to last year. At least that's my hope.
And how many games has he played so far this season?
He played 1 because he was suspended for the first.
Okay. It's not a good start. 50%.
And now he's hurt.
And now he's got a minor little thing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's how it starts, coach. All right. Maybe we'll go a little more positive on this one. Belotti over 9.5 league goals, buy or sell?
Buy. He already scored a third of those on against Salernitana.
We already bought that one. I already called 10 to 15 last segment.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's an easy one.
Yeah.
And then we'll close with some buy or sells on our favorite man, Jose Mourinho. Another one of Nick's favorites, going with red cards. Over 2.5 red cards for Jose Mourinho this season.
I think it's a buy, probably, right, Wayne?
That's a buy. That's surely a buy.
I lowered my
Judging
number.
by the refereeing this last week, that refereeing for sure. If they're going to be doing that to Juventus, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to Roma.
Yeah, I was initially going to set that line a little bit higher, but then I realized he's already missed a couple games for Roma. He's already suspended in Europe. I was like, maybe he'll calm down a little bit. Maybe he's learned his lesson, but I think this is an over.
All right. And then we'll close it.
Lazio
This one
Eagle
is
going to land on. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say we'll close it with this one is mine. I've often made the joke that Mourinho is a 3-year manager. Wheels start to fall off in season 3. This is season 3 for Roma. So do you buy or sell Mourinho still being the head coach for Roma come June 1st of next year?
I think he wins the Europa League and he's out.
Oh, a positive exit for Mourinho. Okay.
Yeah.
it's hard because his contract's up at the end of the year and he hasn't renewed yet. I think the only way he's back next year potentially is if they make Champions League and another big squad doesn't come calling. That might intrigue him, like a Madrid or someone like that, and maybe
Or
he sticks
Saudi.
around. Yeah,
50 million a year to coach in the Saudi league. I think that's on the table.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Wayne, that'll wrap up the episode. Listen, tried to give you the best introduction I possibly could, but we want to thank you so damn much for coming on. Please let the viewers, the listeners know what you're up to these days, where they can find you. Plug away.
My pleasure, man. I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to live the dream. I want to be out there reporting at Roma Club New York, Roma Club DC, whatever it is. That's one thing for this year. I'm really trying to focus on. In the past, yeah, I've written for or done editorial stuff for Roma on IFTV and video, but now I think I, more than anything, just want to, get fans' stories out there and broadcast from places and keep it going and just make something fun that people can, Roma fans in particular, can unite around, and see where it gets me. And if nothing more, at least I could do something for what it means to be a fan of Italian football in whatever small way. So that's kind of like, I've had a lot of how to say, like, not eye-opening, but really trying to put things into perspective in the past year or so of my life. I think, what is this all for? And that's one thing I just want to, I try to think, what am I decent at, man? I was at the beach yesterday, not to get philosophical, but trying to think, like, what do I know how to do? And I was like, I kind of know how to cook and be a parent and talk about football. And I was like, so that's what I'll do. And I'll just try to be the best at it or give it my best. That's
Listen,
the goal now. Keep
I'm
on
gonna
Twittering, keep on YouTubing.
I'm going to hit you with a challenge, man. So, the three of us were all from the New York tri-state area, moved down to South Florida about 7 years ago. There is like no football culture down here. I mean, it's starting now. There is, because Messi's here with Inter Miami, right? And that's absolutely exploded in the past month or so. But like, you mentioned Roma Club New York, and, I follow all these people and all these clubs on Twitter. There's, any major city has Serie A fan clubs. There's none of that down here. So if you could help get one started, I don't even care if it's specific to a team. Let's do like a Serie A fan club for South Florida, because we need the help. It's interesting.
That's a great idea. There should be a Serie A fan club in South Florida for sure. Like from, if you say like West Palm Beach down, yeah, nothing.
So a little upsetting, but definitely, again, really appreciate you coming on, dude. And, Steve, we give Steve a lot of shit, but he knows his shit, but he's a little bit more of the homer when it comes to Roma. I appreciate your even keeled, logical perspective on the team. Definitely,
Thank you.
great episode for sure.
Thanks, guys.